We were supposed to get married this fall. Instead, I moved into a one-bedroom apartment with a cat and a box cards we never sent. I didn't cheat. She didn't either. But somehow, we still managed to break everything without ever raising our voices. I always hated when people called our relationship perfect. Oh, you guys are so stable. I always hated when people called our relationship perfect. Oh, you guys are so stable. You're like the couple people want to be. It's refreshing to see two people who actually work. And maybe we did look that way. Maybe we even felt that way. But if there's one thing I've learned in the past few months, it's that stability and closeness aren't the same thing. You can stand next to someone for years and not realize how far apart you've grown until the silence between you is louder than anything you ever said. I met Caitlin, at my friend Robbie's birthday party. It was a backyard thing, beer and grilled food, and too many people trying to show off their playlists. She was sitting on the porch swing by herself, sipping something that looked like sangria, and wearing this quiet smile like she didn't need anyone to entertain her. That pulled me in immediately. I made some dumb comment about how awful the music was. Robbie always went for early 2010s pop punk when he got tipsy, and she looked up, smirked, and said, "At least it's not Nickelback." I sat down beside her, and we talked the rest of the night. I liked that she didn't fake laugh. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was sarcastic, warm, sharp, but never unkind. A month later, we were inseparable. A year after that, we moved into a little apartment in East Austin. It wasn't fancy, second-floor unit, old creaky windows, a neighbor who always smoked too close to our door, but it was ours. It was home. The proposal happened on a random Tuesday night. No ring hidden in dessert or grand speeches. We were watching Parks and Rec, and I said, "Hey, you ever think about getting married?" She blinked, looked at me, and said, "Only every time you look at me like that." I took that as a yes. We bought a modest ring 2 days later. That was 11 months ago. Now, I don't even know how to describe the now. Things didn't fall apart dramatically. There was no fight, no betrayal, no earth-shattering discovery. It was slower than that. Quieter. Like standing in warm water that turns cold a degree at a time until you're shivering and don't remember when it started. We still live together. We still say love you before bed. But lately, it feels like I'm hugging a coat on a hanger. She laughs at my jokes a second late. I text her memes and get LOL instead of emojis. Sometimes I look at her and try to remember what it felt like to miss her. And maybe she feels the same. Maybe she doesn't. We don't talk about it. I told Robbie it's just pre-wedding nerves. He gave me that look. Half, "You're full of shit," and half, "I'm not going to press it." He's right not to. Because if I'm being honest, there's this tiny part of me that's scared we're already married in all the ways that matter. Except the part where it still feels good. And now, I can't stop wondering if maybe we stayed together because it was easier than not. If you asked me if I love Caitlin, I'd still say yes. But if you asked me if I'm in love with her, I don't know. And that's not something I ever imagined I'd have to say about the person I once called home. The thing about doubt is that it never kicks down the door. It slides in through the cracks, quiet, polite, like it's just stopping by. You don't even notice it's taken up residence until you start adjusting your behavior to make room for it. That's how it's been lately. I catch myself hesitating before sending her a text. I reread messages before hitting send, wondering if I sound cold. I overthink whether to initiate a kiss, a hug, even small touches. And I know, God, I know, that's not how love is supposed to feel. Caitlin isn't stupid. She feels it too. She's always been sensitive to moods, to energy. But instead of talking about it, we both lean into this awkward performance of being fine. She brings home my favorite chips when she stops at the store. I wash her coffee mug and leave it out on the counter in the morning. We're trying. But it's like we're trying to revive a fire by fanning smoke. Last week she stayed out late with her friend Mal. Usually she texts when she's running late, but this time she didn't. I waited until midnight, then called. No answer. 10 minutes later she walked in, smiling too wide. "Sorry, I lost track of time," she said, taking off her shoes. Her eyes were a little red. I didn't ask if she'd been crying. She didn't offer. I wanted to reach for her. Instead, I just nodded and said, "All good." And we went to bed like nothing happened. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking, this is how people fall apart. One quiet moment at a time. The next morning, she kissed me on the cheek and made a dumb joke about how she might elope to Vegas with Mal and spare us the wedding bills. I laughed. She laughed. But her eyes didn't match her smile. The truth is, we haven't had sex in nearly a month. Not since the night we fought about the wedding guest list. It wasn't even a big fight. I said I didn't want to invite my Uncle Alan. She asked why. I said I just didn't, and she said that wasn't a good enough reason. It spiraled, not into yelling, but into that slow, suffocating kind of frustration that builds and never quite disappears. Since then, the distance has been growing in inches. I scroll through our old photos sometimes. Us at the lake, at the food truck festival, in the kitchen trying to make sushi and failing miserably. We used to look so connected. Not just in the posed way, but in the way we leaned toward each other, like our bodies knew something we were too young to articulate. Now, it feels like we're actors in a play we've rehearsed too many times. Same lines, same scenes, no spark. And the worst part is, I still want her. I still want us to work. I just don't know if we still can. Or if either of us has the guts to ask the real question neither of us wants answered. What if love isn't enough? It started with a song. Something dumb on the radio while I was driving to pick up takeout. I don't even remember the lyrics now, just that it reminded me of someone I hadn't thought about in years. Her name was Mia. We dated in college for maybe 6 months. It wasn't serious. We were both too young, too chaotic, but there was a wildness in it I hadn't felt since. I didn't text her. I swear I didn't. But I did look her up. Instagram. Private account. No mutuals. I stared at the tiny profile picture longer than I should have, then closed the app and tossed my phone in the passenger seat like it had accused me of something. The thing is, it wasn't about Mia. It was about the fact that I even thought about her at all. It scared me, how fast my mind reached backward, like it was trying to climb out of something. Caitlin was waiting for me when I got back, sitting on the couch with her legs tucked under her, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, smiled. "You got the spicy one for me, right?" I nodded, handed her the bag, kissed the top of her head. Routine. Easy. Safe. The next day, I noticed her smiling at her phone a little too long. Probably Mal, probably a meme. But still, something about it made my chest tighten. The irony didn't escape me. Me, silently judging her while I'd just stalked a college ex like a ghost hunter. That night, we lay in bed back to back. Not angry. Not even awkward. Just apart. I asked, "You ever wonder what we'd be like if we'd met at a different time?" She paused, then said, "You mean better or worse?" "I don't know," I said. "Different, I guess." She didn't reply. A few minutes later, I heard her breathing slow into sleep. I stayed awake. I thought about how we used to talk for hours, even when we were exhausted. How she once cried watching a dog rescue video and made me promise we'd get a second cat someday. How her hand used to find mine under the covers without even thinking. I missed that, but I didn't reach for her. I didn't say goodnight. I just stared into the dark and wondered how two people can sleep so close and still feel a mile apart. Robbie asked me the question I'd been avoiding. We were at a bar, just the two of us, watching some meaningless basketball game neither of us actually cared about. He took a sip of his beer, looked at me over the rim of the glass, and said, "Are you sure you still want to get married?" I didn't answer right away. I stared at the screen like the score mattered, like I needed to see if the team in blue made that free throw. Then I shrugged. "We're already engaged." He didn't laugh. That's not an answer. I knew it wasn't. But what the hell was I supposed to say? That I didn't know anymore? That I still loved Caitlin, but didn't feel connected to her? That the wedding felt more like a deadline than a dream? I stayed quiet. Robbie didn't push. He just let the silence sit between us, heavy and honest. He always had a way of doing that, making you uncomfortable enough to actually feel things, but not so uncomfortable you ran from them. I think that's why I finally said it. I think something broke. Not all at once. Just little by little. Robbie nodded. "Yeah, that happens. I don't think she even knows I feel this way," I added. Or maybe she does. Maybe she just doesn't want to say it either. He didn't offer advice. He just drank his beer and patted my shoulder like it was the only thing he could do. When I got home, Caitlin was in the kitchen, folding laundry on the table. I kissed her on the cheek, and she smiled, but there was a tiredness in her eyes I couldn't place. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said too fast. "Just work stuff." "Want to talk about it?" "Not really." She nodded. "Okay." And that was it. That was the entire conversation. 10 minutes later, we were watching a show in silence, the kind where nobody laughs at the funny parts because they're both thinking about something else. I looked over at her during a commercial break. She was scrolling through her phone again, and I hated how much I wanted to ask who she was texting. I hated that I even cared. I hated that I didn't know if I had the right to care anymore. Because deep down, I had this feeling that I wasn't the only one having doubts. And if we were both pretending to still be all in, what exactly were we trying to save? It was supposed to be a harmless night out. Just the guys, me, Robbie, a few others from work. At this dive bar we always joked about going to but never did. Neon signs, sticky floors, cheap wings. The kind of place where nothing important is supposed to happen. Except it did. We were a few drinks in when someone made a joke about married life. One of the guys, Jared, just got divorced and was already diving headfirst into dating apps, treating his heartbreak like a punchline. Everyone was laughing. I was too. Then someone asked me, "You nervous yet?" Still time to bail, man. I don't know what came over me. I should have brushed it off, made a joke, changed the subject. Instead, I heard myself say, if she were hotter, maybe I'd be more excited. I meant it as a joke. I think. I laughed after. The kind of forced laugh you hope covers the weight of what you just said. But the table went quiet. Just for a second. Then someone made a noise, and the conversation shifted. But the moment stuck. Robbie gave me this look, sharp, disappointed, quiet. Like he didn't recognize me. I felt it immediately, this sick churn in my stomach. Like I just said something I couldn't take back. Because I had. I'd reduced Caitlin, this woman I'd spent 6 years building a life with, to a punchline. I didn't mean it. Not really. But a part of me knew it came from somewhere dark. Somewhere scared. Somewhere that didn't know how to say, "I'm falling out of this, and I don't know why." When I got home, the apartment was dark. She was asleep on the couch, curled up with a blanket and one leg hanging off the edge like always. I stood there for a moment, watching her. She looked peaceful, like the world hadn't shifted in the last hour. Like I hadn't just betrayed something sacred. I wanted to wake her, to tell her I was sorry, to explain that I didn't mean it. But I didn't. I just walked past her, into the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and stared at myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize the guy looking back. Not because he was cruel, but because he was so goddamn lost. I thought maybe she hadn't heard. Maybe nobody would say anything. Maybe the words I'd tossed into the dark of that bar would stay there, buried beneath bad beer and worse decisions. But secrets have a way of leaking through cracks. 3 days later, I got a text from Caitlin while I was at work. Just one sentence. "Did you really say that I'm not hot enough to marry?" My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. I typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, I wrote. It was a joke. A really bad one. "I'm so sorry." She didn't reply. When I got home, her keys were on the table. Her shoes were gone. So was her overnight bag. The cat food was still in the bowl. Binz, our tabby, looked up at me with that blank feline judgment I swear he reserves for when I fucked up. I called her. Straight to voicemail. Tried again an hour later. Still nothing. That night, the apartment felt too quiet. I sat on the couch with a glass of whiskey and tried to remember the last time we had a real conversation. Not wedding logistics. Not grocery lists. Not, "What do you want to eat tonight?" Something that mattered. Something where we looked each other in the eye. I couldn't think of one. I slept like shit. Kept dreaming of her walking away while I stood frozen. The next morning, she finally texted. "I'm at Mal's. I need time." I just wrote back, "Take whatever you need." I didn't ask for a timeline. I didn't beg. Maybe I should have. But the truth is, I didn't know what I wanted either. I just knew she deserved better than that version of me in the bar. 2 days passed. Then 3. On the 4th day, I came home from work and saw a note on the counter. Her handwriting. Not a goodbye. Just, "We should talk." That night, we sat across from each other at the kitchen table. No takeout. No background music. Just two people who used to know everything about each other, now trying to figure out how to speak. She went first. "It wasn't just the joke," she said. "It was that I believed it. Because part of me already thought you didn't see me anymore. I wanted to deny it. I couldn't. Because she was right. And the worst part? I hadn't seen her for a while. Not really. I'd been living beside her, but not with her. So I told her the truth. About the doubt. About the nights I stayed awake staring at the ceiling. About the old photos. About how I missed her and didn't even know how to say it." She started crying. Not loud. Just soft, tired tears. "I've been talking to Troy," she said. "Just texts. It started a month ago." I didn't think it meant anything. I nodded. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just nodded, because suddenly, everything made sense. We'd both been drifting. We'd both looked for lifeboats in old places. Not to cheat, just to feel something again. We sat there in silence for a long time. Then she said, I don't think we should get married. And I said, I think you're right. The days after we called off the wedding were strange. Not dramatic, not explosive, just quiet, like the world had turned the volume down a notch. She stayed at Mal's. I stayed in the apartment. We agreed to keep things civil. We had a few logistics to sort, canceling the venue, contacting vendors, telling family. The practical stuff. But underneath all that, there was this odd, gentle grief. Not like someone died. More like losing a version of yourself you thought was permanent. We didn't hate each other. That's what made it worse, I think. There was no clear enemy. No final straw. Just the slow, sad unraveling of something that had once been beautiful. Caitlin came by a few times to pick up things. Each visit was polite, careful, like we were handling something fragile. She brought coffee one day. We sat on the balcony in silence, sipping from mismatched mugs. I looked over at her and said, Do you think we waited too long to be honest? She didn't look at me. Maybe. Or maybe we just didn't know how to say the hard stuff until it was too late. I nodded. We didn't need to talk more than that. The air between us was full of all the things we hadn't said when we should have. That weekend I packed up the box labeled wedding stuff. It had the scrapbook she started, brochures for honeymoon destinations, the RSVP cards we never sent. I didn't cry. I just felt quiet. Like turning a page in a book you're not ready to finish. A few days later, she texted, Can I come get the last of my stuff? I said sure. When she arrived, we hugged. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't desperate. It just was. She stood in the doorway with a box in her hands and said, You were my favorite person. I said, You were mine too. That was it. No promises. No, maybe one day. Just a soft, mutual understanding that some loves aren't meant to last forever, but that doesn't mean they weren't real. She walked away. I watched her go. Then I went inside, fed the cat, and sat on the floor for a long time, petting bins and staring at the wall. Not sad. Not angry. Just still. For the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. And I wasn't sure if that made me feel better or worse. I moved out a week later. Not because I had to, but because the apartment held too much of us. Every corner had a memory. The way the bathroom door always stuck in the summer. The dent in the hallway wall from when we tried to carry the couch in sideways. The kitchen drawer that never closed right unless you pushed it just so. It wasn't just space. It was history. And I couldn't live inside it anymore. I found a smaller place across town, cheaper, quieter. Just me and bins. I painted one wall navy blue and hung up a print Caitlin once bought but never got framed. Not because I missed her, but because it reminded me that not everything we shared had to be boxed up and forgotten. She sent me a photo from her new place. A sunlit room with plants on the windowsill and a dog curled up on the rug. She looked okay. Maybe even good. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Some things don't need answers. A month after the move, I got an email from the airline. The honeymoon trip was still booked. Non-refundable. I stared at it for a while, then booked the seat next to mine. Empty. I went anyway. Just me. 5 days in the Pacific Northwest, driving along the coast, stopping wherever I wanted. I ate alone, walked through quiet trails, sat on driftwood and listened to waves instead of podcasts. On the last day, I wrote a letter I'll never send. It said, You were home for me. Even when it wasn't working. Even when I didn't know how to love you right. You mattered. And I'm sorry for every time I made you feel like you didn't. I folded it, burned it in the fire pit outside the cabin, and watched the ashes drift into the ocean breeze. Some people think endings have to be angry or dramatic. But I've learned that sometimes, the most honest goodbye is the one said softly. Not with fists, not with tears. Just two people standing in the wreckage of what almost was, and choosing to walk away with grace. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's what healing looks like. Quiet. Slow. True. Subscribe, hit the like button, and explore more fascinating stories.